All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll just give everyone a moment or two to join me. Can you guys hear me okay? Just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. That's great. That's great. Good. And yeah, I don't usually do this kind of thing in the afternoon, so it's going to be kind of cool just to connect with everyone and say hi and that sort of thing. And Billy says you can hear me loud and clear. Right on. And oh gosh, it's really nice to see you guys here and to be here with you. And I know I see people from all over the world. I'm in Nottingham in England, but I know we've got people from all different countries. So depending on where you are, you may well be confined to quarters at the moment. So I think it's, among other things, it's so cool that we can connect with each other using, this amazing technology. Uh, and the topic for this session is finding your bearings in turbulent times. And there are a couple of things I wanted to say about that just as people are joining and stuff. And the first thing is, I called this a masterclass on finding your bearings in turbulent times. But even as I wrote that, I thought, well, what a ridiculous name for it to call it a masterclass. Like anyone on the planet is a master of dealing with the completely unprecedented circumstances that we find ourselves in. And so kind of the first thing I wanted to tell you guys is, while I have some some stuff to share with you and some stuff that I hope you'll find useful, I can't for a minute describe myself as a master on a master of dealing with the stuff that we're all up against as individuals and as a community and as friends and relatives and societies and so on. I mean, that's kind of the first thing I wanted to say, is there's a way in relation to all of this, we're all babies. We're all babies. We're all doing this, for the first time. And so just thought that is worth touching on, the fact that the other thing that relates to it is, I called this finding your bearings in turbulent times. And there's a piece of it which is very much about the fact that, we're kind of in the unknown with all of this. There's a lot of, uncertainty about, and in a way, rather than it being like we've suddenly got uncertainty where we didn't have it before, what I'm going to suggest to you is that what we've actually had revealed to us over the past month or so, or maybe over the past week or so, or maybe over just the past few days for some of us, is rather than this being entering into a time of uncertainty, what we've seen is the end of the illusion of certainty. And a lot of times when, I don't know, I remember I was listening to Marianne Williamson once, many years ago, and she was talking about the word disillusioned, and that when people say they've become disillusioned, that they often use it as a bad thing. But it's like, actually, if you're no longer caught up in an illusion, that's got to be good, right? It's got to be good. Now, I'm not trying to roll a turd in glitter. I'm not saying that that this the coronavirus crisis that we find ourselves in is an unalloyed good. There's all kinds of negative circumstances that are playing out for people, everything from health stuff to employment stuff to financial stuff to relational stuff to well-being stuff. And my heart goes out to people who have been touched by this in very painful and distressing ways. Obviously, you know, there are people who have lost loved ones, and more who are going to, and this is tough. And we are, you know, it's never been more clear to me that we're all in this together. We're all in this together. So what I wanted to do with this session was to treat it very interactively. We had a number of questions in my original thread where I asked, you know, would a session like this be useful? And a lot of people came back and said, yes, please. And so we're doing this. I asked for questions, and I had a number of questions then, which I'll read out to you, and then I'm going to go through and answer. Or do my best to answer or to speak to, or go, I don't know, what do you guys think too? But if you've got questions here on this call, or if there's anything you guys would like coaching around, you know, I'm here for the next hour. I want to support you and serve you in whatever way I can. And I see we've got a really wide range of wisdom and knowledge and experience here on the call as well. So yeah, it's good to be here, and I feel like we're in good company. So yeah, thanks for making the time. So what I thought I'd do is I'd start by just running through the questions that I received when I first posted about this, and see what occurs to me to say about these, and then open it up to you guys to ask questions or anything else. So I'm just going to take this in the order that they came in. The first one was from Morton Hellison, and he said, when it comes to topics, how to see and respond to the crisis from a three principles perspective. Is it possible at all? Well, you know, the thing that occurs to me is every single one of us is responding every single day in the way that makes sense to us from our current level of understanding, our current understanding of life, our current understanding of who we are. Every single one of us is doing what makes sense to us. And that's really, really, I think that's really, really useful to see. You know, if you're anything like me, you've maybe seen the news or been on social media or whatever. And over the last week or so, I've seen people doing things that look absolutely insane and ridiculous and irresponsible to me. And I've seen people doing things which look utterly heroic and brave and courageous and humbling to me. Like I have so much respect and gratitude for, here in the UK, the doctors and nurses and frontline care workers and cleaners and people in the NHS who are putting themselves right in harm's way to care for people who are ill. I'm very, very humbled by that. And I know that those people, ranging from those people to the people who are, you know, licking shampoo bottles or, you know, ramming themselves into crowded pubs or whatever, everyone is absolutely doing what makes sense to them based on their current level of understanding. So the reason I mention that as a kind of starting point is, you know, we individually and collectively, we're going to have a bunch of challenges to face in the days and weeks and months to come. And that the job of responding to those challenges is probably going to be a little easier if we aren't weighed down with a lot of judgment and blame and finger pointing and that sort of thing. So that's the first thing that occurs to me in terms of looking at this from a principles perspective, is just the really, really seeing that everyone's doing what makes sense to them at their current level of understanding. So that's the first thing. But the second thing that's kind of hitting me right now is that, you know, I remember a couple of years ago, I was interviewing a lady called Mahima Shrestha, and Mahima was working as a consultant to airlines and lived in Nepal. And she had picked up my book Clarity at an airport and had been leafing through it, didn't buy it. And then a few weeks later, the line, "You're living in the feeling of the principle of thought taking form in the moment," kind of popped into her mind. And she Googled it and she found the book and started watching videos about this understanding. And a month or so later, the Nepal earthquake hit, which killed thousands of people and knocked down buildings and that sort of thing. And she was terrified. She was caught up in the middle of it. And then after the main earthquake, there were aftershocks several times every hour, I think, if I remember correctly. And she was terrified. And then she said, at a certain point, while she was sitting in this building and in a certain amount of danger and feeling the aftershocks, she had an insight, and it suddenly hit her. Oh, if you're really living in the experience of the principle of thought taking form in the moment, in this divine energy, creating reality moment to moment to moment, she said, then you're as safe as you've ever been. And you're as safe as you're ever going to be. And she just kind of relaxed. She said that kind of flinch response, that kind of on edge, kind of waiting for the next shoe to drop response just kind of fell away. And my sense would be she got a glimpse of who she really is, of who we all really are. And so anyway, she was on Clarity certification training, so I was interviewing her about this at the front of the room. And one of the other students asked, did you, they asked, how did you know you were safe? Okay. And she said, well, if you mean physically safe, I didn't know that. She said, but we never do. She said, we're in this building at the moment, it could collapse. I'll often say an airplane engine could come through the ceiling at any point and squish me. Like, these things can happen. We never know that we're safe for sure, like physically safe. She said, but what I suddenly realized was that I was psychologically safe. She realized, oh, there's nothing that can harm you psychologically and emotionally, nothing that can damage who you really are. And then someone else asked, oh, so did you go and start sharing this with other people and telling them about it? And she said, well, no, I was in an earthquake zone and, time and place and that sort of thing. She said, however, never underestimate the impact of a sane human being on the people around them. Never underestimate the impact of a sane human being on the people around them. And so it looks to me like when it comes to navigating this from a principles perspective, or seeing this from a principles perspective, I think on the one hand, it's totally natural and normal for any of us, like what are there are over 100 of us here on this session right now. It's totally natural and normal for any of us to get freaked out, worried, anxious, worried about a loved one or about ourselves, to get fearful, scared, maybe grief-stricken. That's totally normal and natural. None of that is anything to be afraid of. Sid Banks, the the guy who first articulated these principles that I point to and that I share with others. He said if the one thing people learned was not to be afraid of their experience, that alone would change the world. You know, when it comes to our physical survival, there are relatively few things that we need. Like we need to, there are basically 6 things that can kill someone. Being too hot can do it. Being too cold can do it. Being too thirsty can do it. Being too hungry can do it. Illness can do it, and injury can do it. Those are the 6 things. So aside from those, you know, if you've got those handled, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Those 6 things. And my guess is, right now, for all of us, we've got those 6 things handled right now. Now that can change, obviously, at any point in the future, but right now, you just check. Chances are that the threats to those things are relatively limited. Now, I know when it comes to illness, we're you know, dealing with a global pandemic, and so we need to be very careful. You know, I've got no advice to give, but the advice I've received about washing your hands and social distancing and that sort of thing, I always like pretty good advice. But aside from that, in terms of seeing this from a principles perspective, knowing that who you really are cannot be harmed by this. That's good to know. Your physical body can, so that's worth knowing as well, which kind of gets me to the next question, actually. The next question is, this comes from Christine Livingston. Christine asked, what does innate health mean in this context? And how might reminding ourselves of it help or not? Well, to me, innate health looks like 2 things in this context. The first is, like, an innate health's not really a term I use much, but if I was to use it, here's how I would see it. The first thing it would relate to is the thing I was just describing, the fact that we cannot be harmed psychologically. Like you may have heard me say at one time or another that the 2 most valuable things a person can discover are how experience is created and who they really are. Those 2 things. Now, how experience is created, that's the way I kind of summarize that is you're living in the experience of the principle of thought taking form in the moment. So, and if that, when I'm talking about the principle of thought, I mean something formless. I'm not talking about the things that run through your head. I'm talking the power that's creating your experience right now. So if you look around the room you're in, or the place where you're listening to this, the things you can see and hear and feel, your experience of them is being generated by the power of thought. It's a formless energy. Now, if that form of words is too cumbersome for you, if you're like, well, I don't really vibe with the idea that I'm living in the experience of the principle of thought taking form in the moment, you might say, like, you're living in the experience of the intelligent energy behind life, creating reality moment to moment, like right now. That's what's happening right now. In this hot second, you might say, you're living in the experience of God breathing life into existence, moment to moment. You might say you're living in the experience of the divine energy of all things, whether in form or in formless, moment to moment to moment to moment to moment. They're all just ways of pointing to the fact that our experience is being created by the mystery behind life in every moment. So that's what I mean by how experience is being created. So when I say that the two most valuable things a person can discover are how experience is created and who they really are, well, who you really are, how I think about it is like who you really are is that divine intelligence behind life. Another way of saying that is who you really are is consciousness itself. You know, there's a quote I love by Teilhard de Chardin that you probably know. He said, "We're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience." But how I paraphrase that is I say, "We're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're one spiritual being having 7 billion human experiences." And who you really are is that one spiritual being. And that one spiritual being can't be harmed by anything. So that's one way that I think about innate health is the fact that who you really are can't be harmed by anything, and that who you really are carries a capacity for insight and realization and wisdom and intelligence and fresh new perceptual reality. You know, you'll and for and to bring you the answers that you need, to bring you the answers that you need. You know, I feel very, very fortunate to be able to even be talking to you guys about this stuff. Uh, I had an insight 12 years ago, April of 2008. I was on a retreat. I was a delegate on a retreat. So, and at the time, I was feeling quite lost in my life. And about 3 or 4 days into this retreat, I had an insight. I didn't know it was an insight, but I had a sudden image in my mind of being with a group of people and feeling such an incredible sense of peace and security and love and connection and well-being, and speaking to them about it, sharing it with them, teaching it. Like I had this real image of it. And in 2008, I wasn't experiencing that in my life at all. Okay. And in the years that followed, I found my way into this understanding. And as we sit here together on this call, I feel like I'm doing that very thing that I glimpsed in 2008. And back then, I didn't even know that was possible for anyone, far less for me. And now, you know, I'm here with you, and I just feel very, very grateful to have this understanding in my life and to be connected with you and able to share this with you in some way. So yeah, I'm really glad you're here, and I really feel grateful to know what I know. I'm curious. I was in the Clarity Pro group the other day, just asking about. I had said we were going to do a change to our schedule, and we were going to do a module, the April module, about dealing with crisis and uncertainty and that sort of thing. And would that be something people were interested in? And lots of people said yes, but also lots of people said how grateful they were to have this understanding at this time with the stuff that's going on, because a lot of people said I would be freaking out if I didn't know this. And by the way, that's not to say that if you are freaking out, there's anything wrong with that. I think under the circumstances, you are totally within your rights to freak out, and me too. I am totally within my rights to freak out, and that's understandable. But I'm just curious to know who's who would who and just type it into the chat if you'd if you have a sense that there's something that you've realized for yourself that's making a difference to how you're navigating this time, that would have been different if you didn't have this understanding. Is it, just type in the word understanding if it's making a difference to you, just so that's how I know, because there's over 100 of us here. It's hard for me to, that's how I calibrate what's going on. Okay, so yeah, lots of people. And here's the other thing that's, oh, this is great to see. There's so many people who this understanding is making a difference to them. That's so great. That's, wow, that's very, very cool. That's great to see. And oh, there was something that just struck me. What was it? Huh, I don't remember. Yeah, I just feel very, very grateful to know this, and I'm glad that, yeah, I'm glad that it's making a difference for a lot of you too. So that's my take on innate health. Like I said, it's not a term I use very much, but uh, I see it in terms of who we really are. I guess the other way I'd say it, which I'm not going to talk about a lot, but there's also just the fact that even in things like illness and psychological challenges and that sort of thing, I often see the wisdom and intelligence of the that everyone has within them, using that to bring people back on track. So Bill Pettit sometimes talks about symptoms as being love letters from that intelligence, to wake someone up to something that needs to change, or to protect them from doing themselves greater harm, or that sort of thing. So yeah, I kind of share that idea that even stuff that looks that people may describe as irrational or unhelpful, or that sort of thing, often turns out to be wisdom in action. So the next question was from Esmond. Esmond asked, what's the next right direction to take into unknown, uncharted, and uncertain territory? And it's funny, at the start of this call, I often, when I'm doing one of these kinds of sessions, I'll have a plan for it, or I'll have certain things laid out that I want to talk about, or that sort of thing. And with this one, all I had was that masterclass was a dumb name for it, because none of us are masters of none of us are masters of navigating the unknown. We're all babies when it comes to navigating the unknown. In fact, in some ways, if you stop and think about it for a moment, to a newborn, everything is the unknown. Pretty much, like they're a baby or a toddler, a little child is just learning and making sense as they go along. And the funny thing is, we're always It strikes me, earlier on I was saying, it's not that we're now in a time of uncertainty and we weren't before. It's just that the illusion of certainty has fallen away. The illusion that we know what tomorrow is going to be like. The illusion that we know what next week or next month is going to be like. We don't have that in the same way that we did a month ago, say, right? But it was always an illusion. Like, I bet no one on this call had planned for their March diary. Oh, at the beginning of the year when they were making the plan for the year, oh yeah, March, I've got to make some time to not leave the house for 3 to 6 weeks. But it was always in the post. We didn't know it, but it was in the post. So it looks to me like actually we're always headed into the unknown. And it's very, very human to want to tell ourselves a story about it, to try and harness the illusion of control and bring that to bear. There's a beautiful quote by the author Terry Pratchett, he's written all kinds of books, including Discworld and all kinds of stuff. And he said, adults need to tell stories to themselves and to other adults because stories have a clarity of structure that does not exist in the messiness of the real world. Stories have a clarity of structure that does not exist in the messiness of the real world. And so we were operating in a story of certainty and control that didn't actually exist in the messiness of the real world. And the only thing, not the only thing, but the thing that has happened for so many of us is that story has collapsed. Okay? And so, what's the right direction was Esmond's question as we head into the unknown. Or let me get the exact words. I don't want to misattribute something. What's the next right direction to take into unknown, uncharted, and uncertain territory? Well, if you ever look at a cat entering a space that it's never been in before, it slows down and it opens up its eyes and it opens up its ears and it starts really paying attention and it explores the territory. It gets the lay of the land because, as human beings, we tend to like what's familiar, but we learn from what's new. We like what's familiar, but we learn from what's new. And a lot of times, people have got the familiar coded as safe and unfamiliar as dangerous. But actually, the unfamiliar is just it's in a maybe state. We don't know. Coming out the other side of this, whatever that means, things are going to be different. We don't know how different, but things are going to be different. Some things are going to be better and some things are going to be worse. And some people are going to think that the things that some people think are worse are better and vice versa. And I'm not saying there isn't going to be tough times for people and tragedy and that sort of thing. There will. And I know that there's very, very real hardship that people are facing. But the thing to remember is, we've evolved as a species over millions of years. And the fact that you're here today means that you come from a long, long line of people who managed to A, survive until breeding age, B, hook up with someone at least once and produce an offspring that itself survived until breeding age and did the same thing. And that has happened over and over again, millions and millions of times. And you're at the leading edge of that, okay? On a planet that for most of that millions and millions of years was ravaged by disease and starvation and predators. Like 90% of creatures die before they get to breeding age, okay? And all your ancestors were in the top 10%, again and again and again. Incredible iteration cycle. So you're built for reality. We all are. Every single person here is built for reality, built for life on this sometimes inhospitable planet. You know, I was coaching someone at a Three Principles conference in London a couple of years ago, doing a coaching demo in front of the room. And they were starting a business and they were trying to be positive about it, but they kept procrastinating. And I said, so what's going on? She said, well, I keep telling myself it's going to work out okay, but I'm worried that it might not. I'm worried that I might fail. I'm worried that it might not go the way I want it to. I said, well, let me help you out with that. It might not go the way you want it to. And she's like, you're not supposed to say that. I'm like, oh yeah, no, it might not. Like, who knows what's going to happen? I said, the issue isn't that it might not turn out the way you think it should. The issue isn't that you might fail or get criticized or have to change direction or whatever. That's not the issue. The issue is that you don't think you could handle it if that happened. And you could. You could. That might be the best thing that happens to you. You don't know. You don't know. So that, in terms of the right direction to take into unknown, uncharted, or uncertain territory, well, here's the other thing that I know about that. You will be guided. And that guidance isn't necessarily going to be, you know, scrolls from God or anything like that. It may just be a sense of what you're enthusiastic about, or what you feel like, you know, it really makes sense for me to do this or that sort of thing. You'll be guided. You know, you have been so far. You'll be guided. And you can trust that. You can trust that. So like I say, I have no evidence that any of us are going to be spared hardship or difficulties or that sort of thing. But what if you don't have to be scared of that? What if you're capable of more than you think? Because you are more than you think. So that's what occurs to me on that one. Geez, I can't believe it's already 20 to 4. Susan asks, how to maintain balance and awareness, i.e. not going off the deep end. Well, I'll just give you my take on that. What I've found is the less concerned I am about how I'm doing, how I'm feeling, the less concerned I am with trying to maintain balance and awareness, the more balance and awareness I seem to get. Like, what if it's okay to be feeling whatever you're feeling? What if it's actually important for you to be feeling whatever you're feeling, experiencing whatever you're experiencing? I'll go one further. What if it's absolutely essential that you be experiencing whatever you're experiencing, feeling whatever you're feeling? Like, what if you don't need to manage your feeling, your awareness, all that stuff? Because it's my assertion to you that you can't actually manage it. That it's a self-correcting system. It's a guiding system, and getting an understanding of how that system works is infinitely more valuable than trying to control, manage, or manipulate it. So that's what occurs to me with that. And then we've got two more, and then I'm going to open it up to you guys. So Carolina said, I'd love coaching on seeing this in oneself. When I look at other people, I see beauty, resilience, and I can point to who they are with ease. When it comes to seeing this in me, I become quite blind. Well, now here's the thing that occurs to me with that, Carolina. I would suggest that what's going on there is a little bit of confusion about who you really are. Like, as I think about it, that when I talk about who you really are, like I'll refer to myself when I'm talking about who I really am. I'm not talking about the body. Definitely not talking about the personality. Like, I've got a personality, right? But that's definitely not the source of clarity, beauty, peace, insight, wisdom. No, it's a sock puppet, right? It's a self-concept. It's a Halloween costume. I'm talking about who you really are. I'm talking about the one who's experiencing it. When we talk about well, I use your words, Carolina, the beauty, the resilience, etc. I made a video about this, actually. You know, I was reading Sid Banks' book, The Missing Link, maybe, I don't know, a year ago. And in the introduction of that book, he says, there are those in this world who believe that miracles do not occur. I can assure such skeptics that they do. With hope and faith as beacons, anything can happen. So I read those sentences, and in a flash, I fell awake for a moment. And by fell awake, what I mean was I fell out of all my thinking about me and my life and who I am and work and business and all this stuff, the world. And this wasn't thinking that I didn't like or that I had it just looked like reality to me, right? And suddenly I fall awake for a moment. And it lasted a heartbeat or a year, like it seemed like just this, what I think William James described as the noetic sense, the sense that this is more true than everyday waking life. And then I'm kind of back in the room and I'm back to my normal sense. But what I'm left with is a sense of peace and well-being and hopefulness and optimism and joy. And the words ringing in my head are, oh, you're going to have a beautiful life and work you love and all this stuff. And you don't even need to know how that's going to happen. I was like, whoa, that's cool. But actually, you know, resilience, if you think about it, resilience, that's something that happens over time, right? Like bouncing back and stuff. So that's not who we really are. Or beauty, that's like an appreciation of something. But who we really are is the formless energy before that. It's before time, space, and matter. That's the beauty. That's the resilience. That's the source of that resilience. That's the source of that, innate health. That's the source of insight and clarity and all of that. It's before time, space, and matter. It's not personal. It's not personal. If you can see it in others, if you get touched by that in others, that's because in that moment you're seeing the truth of them and the truth of yourself. Like when I get hit with a deep feeling of love and connection when I'm thinking about certain people, or through the day, my beloved, my daughters, that sort of thing. But all that means is my thinking about myself has kind of fallen away for a moment. I've fallen into the truth of who we really are. If you're seeing it in others, that's coming from you. That's not coming from them. That's you. That's you. So when we fall awake to who we really are, that's the only connection to love and beauty and resilience and all that stuff. So all the love and beauty and resilience you've ever felt, you've ever glimpsed, you've ever caught a hit off is coming from within, Carolina. You've just been attributing it to other people. So last question came from Kevin Tipper. Kevin's a GP, okay? And Kevin says, here's a challenge for you. As a GP, having interactions with people mostly over the phone in a short phone call, because of coronavirus and that sort of thing, he's doing his work over the phone. As a GP, having interactions with people mostly over the phone now in a short phone call, how can I have maximum impact on relieving anxiety around corona? Well, how it looks to me, Kevin, is the maximum impact is going to come from the feeling you bring to the call, the quality of listening you bring to the call, the connection you're able to find your way into with your patient. Kevin, if you're looking at short calls, trying to teach people the principles in a 7-minute phone call, that's a pretty tall order. But actually, that thing that I mentioned when I was telling the story about Mahima and the earthquake, never underestimate the impact of the presence of a sane human being. So what I suggest is the more you're able to be that sane human being, like that's not really an instruction, it's more like a direction to look in. But the more you're able to be that sane human being, the more you'll be able to bring to the people who you're on the call with. And you may never mention the principles or, thought or any of this stuff. But, some people, you get on a call with them and you have a chat and then you go away a few minutes later and you feel more at peace and more at ease. Like, just out of curiosity, who's feeling more at peace now than they were when they first came on the call? Just type peace in. Okay, great. Yeah. Yeah. Who's feeling more at peace now than they did when they first came on the call? Yeah, great. Thanks, guys. So listen, we've got 10 minutes left. I want to take your questions. If there's any questions you'd like me to speak to, or anything that doesn't make sense to you, or anything that's confusing, or anything you just like, that you'd just like me to speak to, just type it on into the comments, or put your hand up and you can ask me in person, actually. There's no reason for me to be the only voice on this call. If you've got something you want to ask. So Dave, I know you've had your hand up since the beginning of the call, so I'm going to lower it. But if you've and same with you, Jan, but if you've got something you want to ask, just pop up your hand and I'll bring you on. So that goes for you and Jan, Dave, but anyone else as well, if there's anything you want to know or ask me. Okay, so I've been asked, how do you unhook from thinking when you're completely fused in a hurricane of thinking? Well, I don't know, like, I don't really have much to say about thinking, Christoph. The only question that I found helpful personally in that situation is, where do you believe your experience is coming from? Because when I'm caught up in a hurricane of thinking and feeling, like it's not just the thinking, it's the feeling that kind of is anchoring it in place. It almost always seems like my worried or anxious or frightened or angry or whatever feelings are giving me information about the past or the future or other people or myself, my personality, my qualities, my well-being, all that sort of stuff. And what I'm going to suggest to you is that that's not possible. It's like we're living in the experience of the moment. We're not living in the experience of the past or the future. We're living in the experience of this power breathing life into the moment. Every moment, every second, it's moment to moment to moment. And when I'm caught up in a hurricane of thought, it almost always seems like it's not about this moment, it's about the past or the future or what's going to happen or what's going to become of me or what did that bastard say or whatever. It's almost never about the moment. Because here's the funny thing, when things are actually about the moment, we're usually too busy dealing with what's happening in the moment to be thinking about it. It's like if you're getting jumped by an armed juggler or something like that, you're too busy dealing with the juggler to try and to be worried about it. So it's almost always that we get out of touch with the moment. So we've got a question. I have a question around boundaries. Physical boundaries are easy enough, but I'm being inundated with crisis calls from clients. I have a deep desire to support them, but need to protect my own energy right now. What do you have around handling that? Well, one thing you can do, it depends on the agreements you have with those clients, but one thing you can do is just set, here are my office hours. Like if I had that, I would communicate to my clients, hey, I'm available between this time and this time. Or you can, what I have with a lot of my my coaching clients who are on like 1-year packages and that sort of thing, my agreement with them is they can contact me anytime they like. If they want a quick response, I'm much more likely to respond quickly by text message. If they email me, it may take up to a week, but if it's text message, they'll probably hear back from me within the day. And I encourage them to make use of that. But that's only for a very small number of clients. Other clients also who are on, group programs and that sort of thing, they're also able to contact me by Facebook message or whatever, but I have no commitment that I'm going to respond to them. So you just need to, the starting point is just to decide what makes sense for you. What makes sense for you? Once you know what makes sense for you, it's relatively straightforward to communicate that to your clients. So let me know if that makes sense, and if it doesn't, I'll see if I can come up with something else. We've got a couple more minutes. Natalie, go ahead.
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
I'm new to these concepts and the principles in your group, and I'm wondering, how you distinguish between when what comes up is like a wisdom perception, like the cat perceiving the new territory, and when it's just like part of the illusion of, you know, thought and reaction. And because I guess I think of, I try to sort of fine tune my perception so that it's an appropriate wisdom response for appropriate action, as opposed to just being aware that, oh, this is just a feeling and, you know, it'll pass.
Yeah, so I can tell you how that looks to me, Natalie. And this may sound a strange way of putting it, but it kind of goes along with that thing of we're built for reality. And it looks to me like we're living in wisdom, like we're drenched in wisdom every minute of the day. And then we spend a certain amount of time caught up in what I call la la land, which is believing stuff that isn't true, believing that we're feeling the past or the future or other people or whatever. And the moment we wake up to the fact that we're experiencing life in the moment, we tend to get clearer on what makes sense to us. So to me, it all it looks like it's mostly wisdom, and then there's a bit of. I'll give you a metaphor I came up with once, which is, did you ever see that movie Alien?
Oh, I was young.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So like, if you imagine, see the wall behind me?
Mm-hmm.
If the wall represents all the wisdom and intelligence in the world, and then there's like a tiny dot that you can't even see on it of illusion and ropey thinking and that sort of confusion. When someone's caught up in something that's not helpful, it's like they're walking around in the dot, like that face hugger off of Alien. And they're missing the fact that actually, as soon as that falls away, actually there's so much wisdom to be had. And it's just a way of saying that actually, if it wasn't for the fact that you've spent most of your life, most of the seconds of your day living in and acting from wisdom, you probably wouldn't be here now. You'd probably have, you know, fallen off a cliff or walked in front of a bus or something like that. You're living in wisdom almost all the time. And then sometimes we get caught up in insecurities and worries and that sort of thing, but that's okay. And so rather than trying to discern, is this a wisdom thought or is this a, you know, insecure thought or that sort of thing, the thing I found helpful is like, where does this seem like it's coming from? Like the alarm signal is often like insecurity and worry and anxiety. It's like, well, just checking in, does that seem like it's to do with physical stuff right now? Or does it seem like it's coming from future or past or that sort of thing? It seems like it's coming from future or past or concepts or whatever. It might be worth just kind of sense checking it. Does that make sense, Natalie?
Yes. Thank
Great.
you.
You're very, very welcome. Guys, I can't believe an hour has gone in a heartbeat. Lovely to have you here with me. If you've got any questions still, feel free to post them under the original thread on Facebook where I put this out. We'll be releasing the recording if you want to listen to this again or if you want to share it with anyone. Be more than happy for you to. But I hope that's been helpful. Feel free to unmute yourself and say goodbye to everyone if you want to. I'm going to hang up in a second. But lovely to have you here. And sorry for any of those whose questions I didn't get around to. But like I said, if you post on Facebook, I'll do my best to answer them. See you guys.